Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Yeah. C'est moi. How you doing? Say c'est moi. It sounds elitist. French. Hey, how you doing? I think I said that. December 18. That's the date. Looks more Pittsburghy today. It's gray. All that sunshine we were having there last week, it was unsettling. Really. Okay. All right. She's talking about the weather. She's just trying to back in to the content because the content is uniformly horrific. Yeah. Since last I spoke with you. My God. I was, and I can't, this is probably because of old age. I had an interaction, it'll come to me later, with a person, a stranger, a woman I did not know. And now I can't place where that conversation took place, but it was fleeting, maybe lasted 5 minutes or so, must have been some interaction of some sort. All I know is I just sitting here before the show started, I thought of it again. I thought of the conversation and how unsettling it had been. It was a cordial conversation, just, sort of two people making conversation. I can't believe I can't place this. Making conversation while performing some, I must have been maybe at a store, a transaction. I don't know. Anyway. And at some point, I think she said something about how awful things were. It was just an aside. Well, you gotta hope, given the way things are going, something like that. And I found myself saying, yeah. And then she said something else, and then I sort of agreed. And at the time, I'm remembering it now. Dental hygienist. One of those situations where you're not in a position to say much yourself. Your mouth open and she's talking. And I realized during the interaction, and obviously that has to be now 5 days ago. Why would that still stick in my head? I swear I hadn't thought about it since. It just popped back in now because I'd been looking at the horrors of the news. And I realized that in the course of that interaction, where I couldn't talk much, I couldn't place where she was coming from. The things she was saying, the things she were saying were, I could have said, I guess, concerns about how everything seems wrong, the country's in a, it's just there's sort of just general negativity about where we are. And part of me had a sense that she was speaking from the other side. She never said anything that led me to believe that, but I remember somewhere in my, whatever happens when you're the little voices that you're listening to while you're engaged in conversation was saying, just keep it neutral. Don't engage too much here. Because I was, what I guess has stuck with me is that Americans, so horrifically divided and perceiving one another as literal enemies, can have this sort of offhand commiserating conversation about how awful things are. This sense of fear, trepidation, and yet that which she is fearing and I am fearing might not be the same things at all. This general angst and malaise and it's troubling. And I suspect that's part of why, Biden's numbers are so bad. Nobody is willing to acknowledge anything positive anymore. We're just in such a mood. And it's a bad place to be. It's just a bad place to be. Well, I had no idea I was going to talk about that, but boy, am I glad I figured out it was at the dentist's office, Jeez. Anyway. So lots happened since last we spoke, but that's, if by, 1 o'clock this afternoon, a lot will have happened. It just keeps on coming, which is another reason I suspect for the just generalized angst and malaise. I mean, you have again, you don't even know where to start. I woke up this morning to see that U.S. Steel is owned by, is in the hands, or will soon be, of a Japanese, I guess it's Japanese owned now, but they get to keep their name, which is, of course, now a joke. U.S. Steel, owned by the Japanese steelmaker Nippon. It almost seems like you shouldn't keep the name. It's too ludicrous. I mean, if it were named something, like Republic, it could be anywhere, or, whatever. But it's U.S. Steel. That's some serious bragging rights there. It's waving the red, white, and blue. It's, well, they sold themselves to the Japanese. U.S. Steel. And instead, they get to keep their, they get to keep the name, and they get to keep their headquarters, I guess, here. And I thought, well, the headquarters here, they lost that big friggin' building, and it used to, it's all gone. It's all just a charade. Oh, speaking of that, I was driving toward the downtown sometime this weekend on the Parkway East. And, there it is looming, that huge black phallus with UPMC on it. How tall do you think one of those letters is? Well, I mean, really, seriously, how many feet are one of those letters? They're humongous. You can see them. Sometimes you're in another county and you might be on a hill somewhere and you'll look and you'll think, geez, my God, there they are, UPMC. Or you're in an airplane, you're up in thousands of feet up in the air and bang, there it is. It's how you first see the city of Pittsburgh now. And it doesn't say Pittsburgh. UPMCville. But and I've really not liked it for some time. But what I really don't like is that, and I hadn't seen before, is that driving in from that direction from the east now, you get not one UPMC in your face atop a tall building. You get two. Because they've now appended the UPMC Mercy me. And it sits below, obviously, it's not as tall, but very big, impossible to miss. So driving into Pittsburgh now, it's not just UPMCville, it's UPMCville and UPMC. And I suppose if you look to your left across the river, you might see another one. I don't know. It's unbelievable. I hate it. And then coming into the town, all the branding. It's Corporateville, right? I mean, so there's bank names. And it's a kind of I don't know. So the big story, I thought, and it was broken by CNN. Good job. I mean, everybody likes making fun of them, but good job, CNN, dogged reporting. Whoa. And then immediately picked up by everybody else. But it was CNN reporters who pulled together from a number of sources the story of, and it is truly unbelievable, the story of a 10-inch thick binder of almost 3,000 pages holding highly classified information related to how the Russians interfered in the election that Donald Trump won. Not the one he didn't, the one he did. Although he had fewer votes than Hillary Clinton by a long shot, he won because we don't have a true democracy. I mean, we're trying to hang on to this not true democracy. And turns out this binder, well, it went poof. It was in a locked box inside another locked box inside the CIA. I kid you not. The White House wanted to see it. And then, guys, it disappeared. Now, Trump had it for some time, and he loved this thing. He talked about it. He actually said during an interview with an author who was writing a book about the Trump presidency, how many of those have there been? In one of the interviews with one of the authors, he said, I could let you look at it if you wanted. It's a treasure trove. Now, when Donald Trump says it's a treasure trove, my gut tells me he's thinking, this thing's worth money. I could sell this. I mean, or I could barter it, trade it. I mean, wouldn't my pal Putin want to see this? So it's gone. It's gone. And here, it's not funny, of course. I mean, this is so freaked out, the folks in the CIA, that they briefed the Senate Intelligence Committee last year because it's raw data, which means it's full of stuff which hasn't been analyzed or hasn't been decided whether, well, I don't know about that. Is that true? If that's true, then blah, blah, blah. It's raw. And raw data also has the concerning ability for those reading it who shouldn't be reading it to, well, reveal methods, operations, secret sources. As Trump, one few things he said that is true, it's a treasure trove. It's unbelievable. Some reports say Mark Meadows took it home. Why haven't the FBI banged his door down? I don't know. Is that really maybe what they were looking for when they went into Mar-a-Lago? What the hell? Hillary's email. Lock her up. Can't make it. And here's something that I saw that was really disquieting. In October of 2021, the CIA issued a memo to all of its station chiefs around the world. And it was like a 5-alarm fire memo. And it was, this memo came not so long, but after the binder disappeared. And after the binder disappears, the CIA sends this memo to all of its overseas chiefs of station that a number of their sources were disappearing. Just poof, they're gone. And or not just poof, knowingly assassinated. So that's part of this that, if you want to start connecting dots, makes it seem like that which the CIA was so concerned about, in fact, happened. This fell into the hands, the information in it, of our enemies. And they've been acting on that information and taking out our eyes and ears, human beings overseas. And yet, an extraordinary number of your fellow Americans think that Donald Trump is fit to be the president again. And that's the scariest thing of all. Let me share with you a few other things, if I may. That this is all, the detritus from the weekend. I did see on I think it was Threads, which is my replacement for what was Twitter, which is such a cesspool. Now you have to, you have to take a shower after even scrolling for more than 2-3 minutes. So some guy on Threads said this, having seen those reports. And I thought it was interesting given the source, because here's what he says. Why isn't every American seeing this? This is beyond frightening. I'm an independent. I'm not a Democrat. And prior to Trump, I leaned Republican. Now I can never imagine voting Republican ever again. The four most important things to me are getting rid of Trump and putting him in prison, restoring women's rights to fully control their own bodies, sensible gun legislation to include banning the sale of AR-15 style weapons and large ammunition clips, implementing full background checks and red flag laws, and making advances in climate change science. Americans must make sure that Trump is not in any position of power ever again. Well, mere distraught lips to God's ears. Yeah, this is the guy that Americans are ready to vote for. Saturday, Durham, New Hampshire. The man who wants to be the president again was echoing Adolf Hitler. I mean, just flat out, there is no subtlety. He's flat out telling Americans who he is and what he will be. There he was talking again about, those huddled masses on our southern border, the mothers, the little children. He said, they're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what Hitler said about the Jews. And you know what's interesting about this? Stop and think about Donald Trump. I mean, his hatred of immigrants. 2 of his 3 wives. 2 of his 3 wives were immigrants. In fact, one of them, all of his children had their blood poisoned by immigrant mothers. Right? Yeah. Ivana and Melania. Oh, not all. Ms. Maples had 1 kid by him, right? He was quoting Vladimir Putin favorably. He was speaking warmly of Kim Jong-un of North Korea, and oh my God, like a wet dream about Viktor Orban. In fact, Trump said of Orban, the man who can save the Western world. Now that's interesting, because that makes it sound as if Trump sees Orban as bigger than he himself is. And understand who Orban is. And also understand Orban was here recently to talk to big Republicans, CPAC and that crowd, Heritage Foundation, that crowd, because they love this guy. So let's look further at what then the Republican Party worships now in Viktor Orban. He hates immigrants and he hates gays, among a lot of other stuff. And he's a real misogynist, okay? women, gays, and immigrants. That does sort of fit pretty damn nicely with what we see Republicans are into, right? And what Orban has done is lay claim to the fact that it is gays and women who don't respect patriarchy and immigrants who often are not Christian who will destroy, yet poisoning the blood of Hungary. And so this is the kind of triumvirate of boogeymen that really resonates with the far right all over the world. They tie it to, family values. They want to go back to the way things used to be. And if you think of what they're thinking of, they're sure as hell thinking of a time when women knew their place and men controlled their bodies and gays and all this other assortment of whatever TPQ crapola not only knew their place, they shut up about it. They were silenced. And over in Russia, by the way, Putin's been doing a hell of a job on the gay community there as well. What they want, Putin, Orban, Trump, and the folks who love him, is a return to traditional society when white men ruled, white heterosexual Christian men ruled. So they want to get rid of the gays. They want to get rid of feminists. They want to get rid of immigrants. They want to get rid of the public schools that they think are indoctrinating children into thinking that gays are okay. And what we've got to come to terms with is that tens of millions of our neighbors, family, friends are on board. Are on board literally rejecting everything that the United States has stood for, if not necessarily implemented too well, but the aspirational United States values. The White House press office put out a statement after Trump's latest blatherings, echoing the grotesque rhetoric of fascists and violent white supremacists, and threatening to oppress those who disagree with the government, are dangerous attacks on the dignity and rights of all Americans, on our democracy, and on public safety. It is the opposite of everything we stand for as Americans. Yeah, well, until it's not. By the way, the Pope is not on board. One of the reasons a lot of American Catholics, I thought it was clear if you were a good Catholic, the Pope was, that was the guy you listened to, right? Isn't that the Pope? He's Christ's vicar on earth. So whatever he's saying, you're supposed to, he says, march, you march. Am I getting that right? I believe I am. And yet, more than in any other country, American Catholics, because they're full on Republican now, are hating on the Pope. I mean, hating on him. I didn't think you were supposed to do that kind of thing. But even his own bishops in the United States are hating on him. And in a few cases, he's hating right back. Oh, it's like a full-out war between the American Catholic Church and the Vatican right now, in case you hadn't noticed. And this will freak him out. Pope Francis announced this morning that priests will be allowed to bless couples in same-sex relationships. It ain't performing marriages quite yet, but the Vatican had long said it could not bless same-sex couples because it would undermine church doctrine that marriage is only between a man and a woman. And so the new rule, which was put out by the church's office on doctrine, said it's cool because it's not allowing a liturgical rite. Whatever. So they're parsing it in such a way. So the Cardinal Fernandez wrote, one can understand the possibility now of blessing couples in irregular situations. What does that mean? And same-sex couples. So what are irregular situations? I guess married to non-Catholics and or divorced people and or I don't know. Blessing couples in irregular situation and same-sex couples without officially validating their status or changing in any way the church's perennial teaching on marriage. Anyway, the Pope signed off on this. And the office says that this was based on the pastoral vision of Pope Francis. So there you have it. There are American priests right now whose heads are exploding. I wanted to say, in case you come upon a priest with an exploded head, that might have something to do with it. Oh, so I read something in the Atlantic. I do like the Atlantic. Written by a guy who I don't know. I'll share a little of it with you. I read it because of the title. And the title was, Why Trump Won't Win. And, let me have that. Let me see that. That might make me feel better. And the guy who wrote it is named Hussein Ibish or Ibish. And it's not like I'm going to share the whole thing with you, but I'll give you a few highlights. He says, what we know, presidential elections are usually decided by a relatively small group of swing voters in 6 or 7 states. Jeez. And this is why we don't have a true democracy, by the way. Because if we had a true democracy, every vote would count equally, and they don't because of the Electoral College. That nutcase thing that the founding fathers came up with, which might have made sense back then, but sure as hell doesn't make any sense now. None. Zero. Republicans get a head start in any race. Whoever the Democratic nominee runs with like a 20-pound weight on their head and starts 5 minutes after the Republican takes off. It's a system, and I mean, Republicans would have to, they can't disagree that this is not true democracy and that the system that exists gives them, is advantages them totally and not Democrats. And, but they love it. Yeah, they love it. And you'd have to admit, if the shoe were on the other foot, if somehow the structure that the founding fathers had put in place benefited our side, we'd like it too. But the reality is who's the last Republican president who literally did win the most votes? I'm serious. Because the Democrat, I mean, Hillary got more votes than Gore got more votes. Was it Reagan? So the Electoral College has been cooking the books for the Republican Party for so long. It's just maddening. And look where it's gotten us. With a Republican candidate voicing Adolf Hitler slogans and making it totally obvious that he's doing so because he agrees. That's where it's gotten us. Because the Republican Party is not a democratic party anymore at all. Doesn't believe in it. Believes in raw power. It's a fascist party. A white nationalist, Christo nationalist party. Anyway, this guy in the Atlantic says it's those swing voters. Imagine being that powerful in 6 or 7 states. And the most important of those are independent voters and suburban voters. 2 groups that appear to have turned away from Trump since 2016. And heaven knows he hasn't done anything to win them back since. Because his platform has obviously become more radical, more extreme, more openly fascistic and authoritarian. And with him flat out saying he's going after people, I mean, what's his platform? Vengeance, retribution, dictatorship. Is that going to get the swing suburban voters to vote for him? Are they so filled with this angst that I was feeling from my dental hygienist that they would elect someone who has literally called for the termination of the Constitution to keep himself in power? And yeah. All the polling shows that Biden is toast. Even though it's so bizarre because Biden has a damn strong record. He has managed in his first 2 years as president with a 1 vote majority in the Senate and a House controlled by the fascists. He has managed to pass, and this is true, more progressive, consequential economic legislation than any president, arguably, you can argue with me about this, since Lyndon Johnson. Inflation is cooling. Remember, we were heading into a recession. Inflation is cooling. Unemployment is ridiculously low. And yet the public, the dental hygienists, the liberal talk show types are all miserable. And this guy in the Atlantic goes on to say, and look, Biden is old, but so's Trump. And Biden is unpopular, but so is Trump. Trump's record as president, and since January 6th, the fact that his former senior officials are spilling the beans now, all his trials and tribulations, in an election, that's not going to contrast too well with Biden's just steady, maybe even dodderingly steady leadership. And this guy says, and let's hope he's right, by November, enough Americans will surely understand that they are not voting for Biden over Trump so much as voting for the Constitution over a would-be authoritarian. The case against Trump's reelection is obvious, and it's damning. As long as his opponents prosecute that case, they will. Trump is not going to win. Well, that's what we're hoping. Oh, thanks, Milton. God, you're the guy. So George W. got more votes than John Kerry. Okay, so that was 2004. So it's been 20 years since Republicans have actually democratically won the White House. George W. had 62 million and Kerry had 59. That's a win. That's the last one. Wow. Thank you for that. I guess in my head, I couldn't imagine George W. winning, but there you go. I saw somebody point out, like, I'm so sick of our media, I want to scream. Not all of them. I mean, you see, we make these blanket statements and it just leads to the malaise we're feeling. Like, oh, media's rotten. Oh, politicians are rotten. Nothing works. And it's such laziness on our parts when we do that. Refusing to deal with the complexity and the chaos of reality. But looking for here. I'll get it. Hang on. Well, and Colin, excuse me, while I scream at myself. I'm looking. Looking for. Oh, dang it! Oh, here it was. Oh yeah. So they're saying what? I forget who said this. It might have been Robert Reich, I think. I don't know. I read so much and then I don't. I just grab little tidbits and it doesn't necessarily have the author on when I should have the author on. Anyway, he's saying, what is with media that we're seeing? They have no problem talking about Biden, looking really old and muttering and mumbling or saying, misspeaking, right? And well, if you ask a Republican, I mean, that a Republican base, they think he's actually, demented. Actually, the last truly demented president, well, probably was Trump, but before that, it was Reagan, who in his last year or so was already showing signs of dementia. But if you were to put up, like, again, what Trump has said and or done against what Biden has said and or done, and blacked out who it was and said to anybody, okay, one of these guys is potentially demented. Which one? Well, there's no contest. It's Trump. And yet you don't hear, and Rice was talking to some reporters about, why don't you guys, talk about this more? And they say, well, because, it's Trump. It's old news. Everybody knows he's nuts. That's no reason not to talk about it. Apparently not everybody knows he's nuts. Some people think he's Christ on earth. Here's something he said. I hadn't seen this one. This is wondrous. This, I guess, was in September, when California's wildfires were still raging and all of that. And here's what Donald Trump said. They say there's so much water up north that I want to have the overflow areas go into your forests and dampen them. Because if you dampen your forest, you're not going to have these forest fires that are burning at levels that nobody's ever seen. So there's Trump saying that the way to prevent forest fires, anybody have contact information for Smokey the Bear? The way to prevent forest fires is dampen the forests. Okay? That comes from Donald J. Trump, who once suggested we all drink bleach, right? To get rid of COVID. On the stump, Trump is constantly saying Obama when he means Biden. He doesn't even know who he's running against. Imagine if it went the other way. The hue and the cry. It's the guy who says that whales are being killed by windmills. I'm just saying. This is what... God. And according to Rice, he says, the most telling evidence of Trump's growing dementia is found in his paranoid thirst for revenge and vengeance. But he's always been a paranoid, and he's always been vengeful. Anyway, so if Biden's age is fair game, why the hell isn't Trump's and his apparent mental, not to mention psychological, decline? Rice says this: Biden may appear frail at times, but he's rational. Rational! The growing evidence of Trump's dementia and paranoia, on the other hand, poses a potential danger to the future of our country. At the least, the media should be investigating and reporting on it. God. Okay. Dampen the forest. That's all I'm saying. People sometimes say, what am I supposed to do? Everything's so out of whack. I don't know what it is. What can I do? You can carry a bucket of water into the forest. That's all I'm saying. Hey, way to go, Pete Buttigieg. Did you see what he did? Transportation Department, of which he is secretary, has fined Southwest Airlines. The fines are always like, this one actually is somewhat sizable, $140 million. Has fined Southwest $140 million for what they say were multiple violations of the law. You remember Chris, it was a year ago. pretty much. Christmas and New Year's, Southwest had a meltdown. Nothing worked. People were stranded for days and days and days. You remember that? They figured that well over 1 million, I guess, 2 million people were unhappily affected. Southwest canceled or significantly delayed 17,000 flights. Now, this was weather related, they said. Meanwhile, all the other airlines had the same weather. Oh, man. Okay, so there's that. And here's what's good about it. So they fined Southwest 140 mil and ordered the airline to establish a $90 million fund to compensate their passengers affected by any future delays. Now, is that something that all the airlines should have to do? I mean, the way things go now, they can screw you up left, right, and center and not have to pay a thing or put you up or find you a bed to sleep in, right? They don't. Anyway, this is 30 times the 140 mil is 30 times larger than any fine that has ever been issued by the Department of Transportation. And guess what? Southwest has agreed to pay the fine. They're not crying foul. Well, they might be in their back rooms, but they're not. Okay, in the time we have left, I just want to say this one thing in as plaintive voice as I can muster. And this is to the Israeli people. Please, I am begging you to demand that Netanyahu step down immediately. We know you're capable of taking to the streets. Take to the streets in numbers never before seen and get that SOB out. And then you can deal with him later. Every minute he's in office, he harms you. Okay, I want to share with you something I saw in the New York Times, maybe on, I don't know, Saturday or something. And it's one of the few times I've read something that I ended up, moved to tears. And I'm staying in the vicinity. It's a story told by one of the hostages. Her name is Chen Goldstein Almag. She was taken into Gaza along with 3 of her children, a daughter who I think was 17, and her 2 little boys, 11 and 9. Before she was taken, she watched her husband and her oldest daughter killed in front of her and their children. So they killed the father and a 19-year-old daughter, and they took the mother and the 3 kids. And they have since gotten out. And so she did an interview. And I just want to, it's fascinating to me in many ways. I'll read you some of it. The strangest part of her 7-week ordeal, she says, were the long, almost intimate conversations she had with her captors. They talked about their families, their lives, and the extreme danger they were all facing. One of the gunmen even apologized for the killing of her husband and one of her daughters by other Hamas gunmen. It was a mistake, he said. It was against the Quran. She is 48 years old. She said that she and the children were held together. They were treated respectfully and not physically harmed. But she said that over the course of a number of moves, going from hiding place to hiding place, they had met other hostages who were obviously badly treated, and 2 women who she said who were sexually abused. So she was lucky. She said she was kept in different apartments, in tunnels, in a mosque, even in a supermarket. She said that the men holding them often didn't seem to know what the hell to do. She said one of the moves, she says it was the middle of the night, everything was dark. They started deliberating among themselves. I could see the helplessness on their faces. When we were out into the street in total darkness, there was a shot above us. We were pressed against the wall, and I could see a laser pointer as if we were being targeted from above. And all I was thinking was, that's our Air Force up there. It was crazy, she said. Absurd. Her conversations with her guard sometimes went on for hours. And maybe because she was a social worker and knew how to keep someone in a long and deep conversation. And she also thought it would help to keep her and her children safe. The guards taught her son 250 words in Arabic, bought him a notebook to study. There were even times when the guards cried in front of them, worried about their own families. And she said we were, all of us, in daily danger. It was fear at a level we didn't know existed. She couldn't stop replaying the death of her husband, whom she had dated in high school, and the death of her daughter, Yam. When they were told they were to be released, the lead guard turned to her and gave her a warning. Don't go back to your kibbutz. Don't return to a place so close to Gaza. Go to Tel Aviv or somewhere farther north, because we will be coming back. And she said to him, next time you come, don't throw a grenade. Just knock on the door. Something about the humanity and that, both sides, people in fear, people let down by their governors, their governments, who were too busy looking after themselves. In Hamas's case, taking this wealth that they had, it's now been shown they had $500 million. And what they do with it? Did they make the lives of their people better? No. That didn't serve their purposes. No, they built all those tunnels and they bought more weapons of war. And what did Netanyahu do? He doubled down on making sure there would never be a Palestinian state. He emboldened the nationalistic settlers in the West Bank, and he spent all his time trying to stay out of jail, protecting not his country, but himself. Both the Israelis and the Palestinians deserve so much better. See you tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.